Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome back to the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Masesa Demian. I've been off the set for quite a lot of time, I think, a number of episodes. And of course, I need to thank my colleague, Honorable Monica Moding, who has been around to stand in for me as I was transitioning into one of the other parts of growth. I know, and thank you to the team, the backdoor team that allowed me to have my rest of the function that I had that was quite hectic, but interesting. And thank you very much, our viewers, for keeping on, and of course for keeping the growth coming. Today, and just like we know, discussing topical issues, we've been having quite a lot of events running around, of course, with the demise of our Speaker, the Right Honorable Jacob Oulanyah. Events then followed that, of course, hinted on the politics of identity in Uganda. And these are some of the discussions that we'll have today. And of course, events that happened on a Tuesday that we saw finally DRC being welcomed to the East African community. And of course, to discuss this topic on the politics of identity in Uganda, and the DRC, the significance of the DRC welcoming in the East African community is, I have a panel of course, very, very experienced panelists that will have to give us details on how these events unfold. And to discuss this and much more, I need to welcome my panelists. Let me start with the East African himself, the elder. East African, Ndugu Ndebesa Mwambustya, who is, of course, a political analyst and a lecturer at Makerere University School of Humanities and Social Sciences, but also a senior fellow and researcher with the Great Lakes Institute of Strategic Studies. And Ndugu Ndebesa, you're welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, good afternoon, dear viewers and listeners. Thank you for inviting me to share this important topic that has shaped the history of Uganda.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and of course, thank you for always honoring our invitations. I've been away, but at least I've been seeing you on set.
You are welcome.
Yeah. Then, of course, the youthful and, of course, in the generation of, we would say the generation of today, is Jacob Eyeru, the chairperson of the National Youth Council. Jacob, you're welcome.
Thank you, Damian, and it's a pleasure to be back on the show. It's been a while for me.
Yes.
It was not longer than you. You went deeper in integrating, but it's been a while, and I'm very happy to be back here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jacob. Of course, I will need to have that youth perspective on these issues. Then finally, our regular panelist, and of course, the elder and the ideologue of senior ideologue of U.P.C, political analyst, Joseph Ochieno. Joseph, you're welcome to the show.
Good to be here, and good to be here with you two young guys. It's delightful to welcome you back, having crossed the floor. Crossing the floor not from anywhere else into U.P.C, you're U.P.C, but particularly crossing the floor into the family mode. So Jacob was hinting that you actually got married. So really, really congratulations to you. It's fantastic stuff, because the focus of everything else starts from the family. So wish you and your wife very fantastic best wishes going forward.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And of course, Jacob will have to pick some notes at some point.
Trainee Jacob.
The church is still having vacancies.
And dive deep into, of course, the conversation. Of course, we know right away from colonialism. Colonialism, of course, significantly impacted on, and of course, it's part of what brewed so much on this politics of identity in Uganda. And of course, we know post-independence, the leadership, the governments in there, of course, rallied so much on this politics of identity about that time. To my panelists, of course, colonialism, like we know, contributed so much on the confrontational kind of identity politics in Uganda. And the post-independence governments, and of course with the leaders, also used that same platform to steer up and also stamp in so much on identity, the politics of identity in Uganda. And of course, the president of Uganda today is on record, Mr. Museveni, to have said that, of course, the leaders who use identity politics are ideologically bankrupt, but also are, I think that's what Yoris uses so much, and are backwards. And this we think it's of course we think ideological politics of identity is a backward politics kind of approach. But today again we're seeing it so much being amplified, of course, with from when we lost our Speaker of Parliament. And to discuss this, but then we've been joined by our almost irregular panelist, Honorable Obigah Rose, the MP of woman MP of Terego District. Honorable, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm happy to be here. Yeah, you know, from the time we lost our speaker, it has not been easy. And you know, I'm from the ruling party, so and I come from West Nile, and the late speaker was our vice chairperson for actually Lango and West Nile.
Wow.
So I'm really sorry. Last week I was not here, but I'll become regular.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable. And of course, it's also my first time to have a conversation with you, returning from a long holiday, but I'm happy to see you.
You like me?
Yeah,
I'm a rural girl, but polished.
Thank you. I think Joseph, of course, confirmed that at some point. He says, yes, we need her almost on a regular. Thank you for honoring this invitation. And just to get into the conversation, I'll start with the senior historian and, of course, the senior East African on this conversation. We know identity politics runs in issues of race, ethnicity, and of course the religion in Uganda. Mostly is what most of these leaders use so much. But we need to discuss this. Identity politics in Uganda. Why is it troubling? And what can be done about this?
Thank you, but we don't want to begin from there. You had already given some kind of history. And that history is not so much correct as you put it and others put it. That identity politics started with colonialism. I don't think that is the beginning of identity politics, unless you want to say that there was no politics before colonialism came. But what is identity? Identity has something to do with what I would call affection and emotions. And there is no time in history when there were no emotions. And therefore, to dismiss the role of emotions in shaping behavior and to begin it with colonialism, I think is to get it wrong. And to remit it to Uganda is equally wrong. We have racism in America, we have populist nationalism in Europe, and even Putin is saying he's going to Ukraine because they are fellow Russians or fellow Slavs, for that matter. So identity politics is not new. And here in Uganda, we have to appreciate the material upon which Uganda was created. If you don't appreciate that one, then you don't appreciate the challenges. First of all, Uganda is so diverse that if you can use the biblical language, Uganda is the Tower of Babel. It's like at the Tower of Babel. We have got 5 linguistic groups, not dialects now, I'm talking about linguistic groups of people living in Uganda. That is unprecedented in a few African countries, maybe equivalent, can be Kenya or something like that. Because you have got the Bantu, the Sudanic speakers, you have the Luo, you have the so-called Nairohamites, but we call them Ateker, and you have the Karenjin. All these, when they speak, you will find the Tower of Babel in Uganda. So you have got these people with affection, with emotions, people who share the same history, the same language, the same customs, the same culture, the same norms and values, we tend to associate with each other all over the world, in history and today. So there is that raw material upon which Uganda was created, out of 5 linguistic groups. But then when it comes to dialects, which you call ethnic groups or tribes, there are very many. The Constitution recognizes 60, but the next review of the Constitution, we shall have more than 60, because every day people are aspiring to have their own tribe included in the Constitution of Uganda. So that is the raw material we are talking about. And when there is competitive politics, politicians and even the voters themselves will tend to use any instrument possible to go into power, or to acquire power, or to acquire seats. So that is the background I thought we need to appreciate, that Uganda is already linguistically and ethnically diverse. It is as diverse as that. Then colonialism comes in. Actually, there was no Uganda until colonialism came. When colonialism came, the British, officially, formally, Uganda was declared a British protectorate in 1894. That's around 120 years ago, I think, or thereabout. And that's not a long time in history of society and of state making and nation building. That's a very short period in time. Now, the British united us and divided us at the same time, because we were different communities. They brought us together. But they brought us together, but they had no conscious policy strategy to unite all these different ethnic groups. Instead, they used divide and rule, which created more challenges of these identities and identity politics. Because, for example, they took up Uganda and they made it actually more prominent than the other communities in Uganda. Then they took Uganda system of administration to other regions of Uganda, and then they made the Baganda go. Actually, later on, historians came up with a concept called Buganda sub-imperialism. In other words, they made a mistake to call it Buganda sub-imperialism, but in actual fact, it was British imperialism using Baganda agents in other regions of Uganda. Then they brought communities like in Toro, they brought together communities of the Batoro, of the Bamba, Bakonzo, Babwisi, Bagabo, Basongora, E.C. in one district, presided over by Batoro. That was also a challenge. And they never got to unite these people. So you go to every region. If you go to Kigezi, you had the Banyarwanda, Bafumbira, Bachiga, and Bahororo brought in Kigezi in one district. But this was unnatural, in quotes. So then they created the Legislative Council. Sorry, before the Legislative Council, they formed the Legislative Council, Legico Parliament, but the Africans were not there, so that they would have a national institution where they would meet. But they created later in 1940s district councils, 50s I think, district councils, and they had made sure that each ethnic group almost falls into one district, but in others it was not the case. Like the example I gave of Toro, of Bukedi, of Kigezi, of some regions, but in others like Teso, Acholi, you find that they would have one ethnic group put in the same district, and therefore creating a council, a district council, where the politics remained district. There was no national institution where these people met. Then this was compounded by religion, especially between the three major religions or denominations, the Roman Catholics, the Anglicans, and the Muslims. And Protestantism was a de facto state religion. So the British discriminated the Catholics and Muslims in favor of the Protestants. This naturally brought about these divisions along religious lines and along ethnic lines. And when time for Africans participating in politics came in the 1950s, these divisions that had been pre-existing came on the surface. But the British maybe did little to unite them or failed to do that one. And that is the Uganda we had in 1962. I would like to invite the listeners out there or panelists here who have never read the Uganda Relationships Commission report of 1961, I think, called Munster report. It was a commission set up by the British called the Uganda Relationships Commission, chaired by a certain Munster, and it is popularly known as the Munster report. It actually talks about all these identities before independence and failed to suggest how they would be resolved, but that report can give you the picture. And anybody who was politically literate in 1962 could have predicted what happened after 62. So, moving fast, that identity politics came to the surface almost during elections. There was that identity politics, 61, 62, and then it led to the 66 crisis, because the 66 crisis, among other factors, was a result of this identity politics, because there was a struggle between Buganda and Bunyoro over where the lost counties would be. And this one could not be resolved by the British. The British, by the way, failed to resolve it. It was so sticky that the British left it to the Africans to resolve, but I think the British knew they would not resolve it. And Obote tried to resolve it the way he did. But we have to appreciate the challenges that U.P.C and Obote had. Here was the president of Uganda who doubled the Kabaka of Buganda. That was a very big challenge, to have a president of Uganda who was the Kabaka of Buganda. And you appreciate the Kabaka also. He was told to sign a bill that would make one of his component parts, Buyaga and Bugangese, go away. He refused. And Obote did sign it. And that brought a row between President Obote and Kabaka Mutesa along those ethnic lines. Onward, it continued even during Idi Amin's time. Politics was along identity lines. At one time, President Idi Amin was the president. His vice president was Mustafa Adrisi. They were both Muslims, and they were both from Western Nile region, originated from Western Nile region. Onward. So identity politics, it has been a fact of life in Uganda, so much so that some people have even suggested that why don't we accept it as a reality, like almost Kenyans have accepted it, that instead of having multi-party, we have multi-ethnic politics in Uganda. There is this whole idea of some politicians who claim that there is no identity politics. When they are saying it, they themselves are practicing it. There is identity politics. It is a reality. These emotions are a reality. You can't wish them away. Even the Constitution made matters worse. I don't know whether worse or whatever. We have got national citizenship called the citizen. You are a citizen of Uganda by the following. Legally, juridically, we have Ugandan citizenship. The Constitution went ahead to say, Karangara, Masaka, Mubende, Mukono of Buganda. Masindi, Waima, Kibale of Bunyoro. Chitugum, Guru of Acholi. Mbarara, Bushenyi, Ntungamo of Ankore. That was recognition of another layer of citizenship. And so when people are playing politics like we are seeing now about the Acholi, it was recognized and endorsed in the Ugandan Constitution that Guru, Chitugumu, now Nwoya or whatever, are of Acholi. And therefore there is some place called Acholi land. And some people can claim that that is Acholi land. So we created two tiers of citizenship, one national, one local or ethnic. And that ethnic one can be called empirical. That is the real one. That is empirical citizenship. The other one is illegal citizenship. And therefore it is inevitable that we shall have some of these challenges because the government has not come up with a systematic way of reducing these affection. I will give the example of myself as I end. Sometimes on Facebook, people have located me in Tororo because there has been a debate or a contestation about Tororo between the Japadora and the Iteso. And I have joined that debate about the control of Tororo. I am the first one. I have seen the people of Tororo have bought my idea. I was the first one to suggest that let Tororo be a city to address the question of these districts because now it will transcend those ones. But the point I'm making is that some people, I saw some people replying to my Facebook post as if I'm also from Tororo. The reason is now I have affection for Tororo, although I am from Ntungamo. The reason being that although I am from Ntungamo, I did my secondary education in St. Peter's College, Tororo. And therefore, that one has helped me to reduce this affection only remaining in my area. The challenge today is that people study from their home area Then the universities are now home area. Then the jobs is for the home area. In our days, it was a different case. My first choice actually was St. Peter's College, Tororo. My second choice was Muvara. My third choice was Chitugum High. My fourth was Boroboro.
From Muntungam.
Yes. And I deliberately did that. But today, people study from their home area. In other words, the government can come up with policies and programs to create a nation like Nyerere did in Tanzania. In Tanzania, whenever you would go to senior one, since it was only the government in the past, nobody was allowed to study senior one in his home area. And after HSC, there was Jeshi la Kujenga Taifa, JKT. After HSC, you not go to the university unless you participated in the national service in the Tanzania People's Defense Force. And you would not be allowed to do that one in your home region. You would have to do it in another region. And since they had also the language which united them, among other factors, Nyerere himself was a nationalist. And he did not amass wealth, and his tribe, the Zanaki, did not amass wealth, because he did not even have his own house until CCM built him a house when he had retired. So there are very many factors that lead to identity politics. You cannot wish them away. You cannot legislate them away. You cannot proselytize them away. You cannot Chankwazinize them. They will be there, whether you like it or not. I thank you.
Thank you very much, of course, Professor, for that detailed history that you've given us. And of course, all the panelists here would appreciate that. And of course, it has shaped the context of our conversation. I would want to bring in a more youthful voice. Of course, the chairperson of the young people in the country. And of course, speaking from what the president today keeps saying is that the politics of identity is for the bankrupt, people who are ideologically bankrupt. And just after the elections of 2021, we saw in his address, the first address, he was so much, and his sentiments bordered the politics of identity about that time. And of course, with what happened at that time, everyone saw that. And today we are discussing it just after the demise of our speaker. We saw quite a lot of amplified ethnic undertones that came through, and with the apologies of our senior leaders, with the words they sent around. We just need to bring, that's why I need to bring you in. What then should we do as a young person? How do we go about this? Why is this troubling today?
Thank you, Demian. And I want to start by appreciating, I don't know if it's professor or doctor, but I think it is just
call me East African.
Yes. He has given us a good depth to understand the history of the problem, and perhaps to consider not calling it a problem, looking at it as a reality that we have lived with since our existence. But to come to your question, I think that in my own regard, the future of our country, especially the future of young people, of connection, is not a future that is going to be determined or curtailed by the identities. Why do I say so? Because as we move forward with the information age, you get more cosmopolitan environments where very many groups come together, and their interests of being together are not ethnic interests, but also their ethnic masteries begin to disappear. If you, I think we'll all agree, if you consider young people that are growing up in our urban centers today, and you consider those that are growing up in the rural centers, there is a very clear difference between their masteries of, one, their ethnicities, but also two, of their affiliations with those ethnicities. The politics on the ground, yes, is still heavily influenced by the ethnicity, but as we move into urbanization and a lot of cosmopolitan development, the interlinkages between ethnicities begins to disappear at the table of need, which is of livelihoods, of existence. Now, that does not mean that there is no continuation of the problem of ethnic politics and politics of identity. It is there. But the people that propagate it, the groups that propagate it, are the groups that hold on to power and can propagate it. I would say fiefdoms of political nature. That there are people that dominate a particular ethnic political action. For example, it is there was a time when it was practically impossible to talk about politics of Teso, where I come from, without talking about the name Mike Mukola. And what Mike Mukola says nationally is considered the position of Teso. There was a time when, if you are looking at certain areas, you will talk about the Honorable Deletua Pakabulo, you talk about different people for different ethnicities, that they would be the face of how the ethnic group is relating with the country. Now, in such instances, there is a quick progress based on the personal presentation of the leader. If the leader says that I am interested in promulgating a politics that puts the ITESO in my Honorable Mukula's situation ahead of the interests of Uganda, that will be a very different situation. And that will, as for us young people, now groom the possibilities of understanding how do I maneuver my politics around my identity. When I went to run for my position, I just had my own beliefs that we needed to change for this country as young people. And I associated with the NRM party because I felt that it represented two things: my best chance of winning, but also my best chance of influencing anything if I really wanted to change something. When you go down there, the politics changes language. It's not about just party alone. When you come at the national scene, it doesn't just happen to be which party are you from. It also includes which area are you from and which areas coalesce with that area that you're from. Unfortunately, if you are interested in holding political power, you maneuver the political framework that exists. You don't present a totally new idea that will not allow you hold political power. And I think this is why there's still a persistence of a politics of identity, because it is the politics that works in a lot of a national interplay. And that's why you will see that there are historical sentiments that exist. But I will beg the indulgence of my fellow panelists. The politics of identity, as we have known it in history, does not present the same way today. The instance of, for example, the emergence of new political parties. In the last election, the National Unity Platform, which was branded largely, and in fact, in membership, when we see the faces, has a lot more Uganda than many others in their ranks of leadership, performed poorly in areas that were not Buganda, and they performed very well in Buganda. But that was not the case with the former party in opposition. That was not the case with FDC. It is certainly the case with U.P.C, but it was not the case for other parties that did not have any form of maneuver. If you talk about PPP, they were not performing best on which faces at the top. So
what about to U.P.C?
I am not going to say, because I think the senior is here will say more about that. But we all know where all the U.P.C MPs come from and the historical lineage it has with the leader that founded the U.P.C. So I think that what we are now looking at is a bit of a departure, which is to say, except for the Nup situation. But urban areas were tending to vote more for opposition, even in areas dominated by the existence of an ethnicity that was affiliative to those in power. Whether you are looking at Lamu sub-region, where U.P.C is dominant, whether you're looking at Western Uganda, where the NRM was dominant, there were areas and spots there where ethnicity was not determining the politics. Whether you're looking at Teso in the recent election, Teso did not overwhelmingly vote along ethnic lines. They, yes, had a presidential candidate from the land, and they returned many MPs of FDC nature, but Teso did not overwhelmingly vote for their candidate. So I think that the new population is departing more from the politics of identity towards the politics of necessity. Unfortunately, as long as the political elites that are in practice keep maneuvering the politics of the day through ethnic lines, they will be buying in and recruiting more players of the nature. If I, for my own instance, has to get an appointment, say, from the president, based on the fact that I come from Teso, then I will highlight that more. so that it can sustain me in the politics. And that's the point I'm making. However, if of my own abilities and with indifference to my ethnicity, we are able to progress certain ideas. And when someone checks the work that I've done, it does not seem to sit on a particular ethnicity, they will be able to say, okay, perhaps we need to move in this direction and listen to that. And I think he made the good analysis of what happened in Tanzania, where I personally have an icon in Mwalimu Nyerere. The idea of creating a nation must collapse ethnicity. And in Tanzania, the biggest idea in collapsing ethnicity was to first collapse the dialects as the major driving factor. Because whenever we had an election in the electoral college, the Acholis were all able to speak in English, but they would coalesce in Acholi, as would the Banyankole, as would, of course, now the Uganda are disadvantaged. It's almost lingua franca, so all of us can speak it. But you would find that people would prefer to discuss their issue in their ethnic dialect before they can present it to you. And that challenge perpetrates politics of identity and of saying this is our own and so on and so forth. When you come to national leadership, and I'm glad that the Chief Justice has withdrawn his statement to avoid aiding the politics of identity. His statement was wrong factually, and he admitted that. But what he did not retract was the question of whether there are groups that are not presenting poorly Buganda, and spoiling the image of Buganda, and requesting the establishment to call them out. I think that in that instance, it is very clear that he is talking to the fact that there is the capacity of an ethnic group to actually play a role in downplaying the politics of ethnicity. And this is because ethnic groups actually have leaders. The Karaka, the Omukama of Toro and of Bunyoro, the Chabazinga can play a pivotal role in ensuring that politics of ethnicity does not continue. And that is in how they are able to deal with their subjects who promulgate it, or they are not promulgate it, or who perpetrate it. But they can also be able to, in their public statements, in their operational framework, build a more nationalistic country. I do not know if it is in their interest to do so, but it would be in the interest of the nation for the Kabaka of Buganda to do activities in Teso, to do activities in Acholi, and that would help to balance out the question of identity in our politics. So I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob, and we'll of course dig deep in some of the issues you raised, especially on the change in times, on whether still, of course, we'll see since there's a technology is of course taking over, and people is more of a cosmopolitan kind of society. It's something that we'll need to discuss through, but I need to just go back into the times with Ochieno, because of course then you at the point U.P.C. where you are was one of the parties post-independence that is believed and to have more of worked and pushed so much the politics of identity then, and until when the president really, the recent government took over.
To the contrary, he will answer.
When the recent government, of course, took over, one of the 10 points program, of course, with the president, those are some of the things he highlighted, and he said, no, this will need to stop the politics of identity.
Where do you get your facts from?
To date, how far are we? Do you think we've gone back to the times, or?
I actually feel offended by that, because actually what Museveni did from the beginning until today is actually to break everything that Obote, to an extent Sir Edward, founding parents of this country, starting with her grandfather and others from across this country, to try in huge attempts to dismantle aspects of what Professor very ably gave to us, but at the same time to climb over the obstacles that they found themselves of a reality Ugandan nation state at independence to ensure it was a nation that was able to survive and thrive in diversity. Museveni,
He is my president.
in 1980,
Our president is not
Our
your president.
president, yeah.
in 1980, no, you guys, the two of you would obviously find it difficult, and I know that, that because he's your leader, and yes. No, Museveni the man. Actually, when UPM was being formed, I know an Acholi leader, I think he's actually still in exile, Akena Pojok, who was actually the favorite chairman to take over. And allegedly, I get from Akena, Museveni said that no, the two main established political parties are built around tribe and religion. And his argument was that DP was Protestant, or rather Catholic, and Buganda, a semblance of representative truth, particularly on the question of religion, because DP was founded to counter some of the pressures that Professor was referring to. But U.P.C was not a Protestant political party, nor was it necessarily a northern political party. The founder of Uganda National Congress was Ignatius Musazi, a guy from Luweero, where Museveni decided to take his democracy at Kabamba. So some of these things are neither here nor there. But much more importantly, he built on from there, got ownership of UPM, and ran with UPM as actually an alternative to this. But very importantly, actually, when Museveni came to power in 1986, of course, you young man, you would not have been there. I was there. Part of the narratives in Kampala, and this is official, that's why I'm saying it publicly, with this Oyo Mucholi.
Anyanya, actually.
And the Anyanya thing, yes, Anyanya and Mucholi. And the Mucholi thing was unfortunately a very specific focus that drives into this thing. It was extremely divisive. I was at Makerere when these NRA guys were there. And one time I was just on my way to Wandege and I nearly got lynched in Wandege. Where actually average young guys would say, oh, uno, Mucholi. Something like that. Because of Museveni. Number two. Number three, I've got two files. Of people from Bukedi who are seeking compensation from this NRA regime for having been pushed out of Buganda because they're non-Bantus. Pushed by NRA Museveni. He fueled this thing in Luweero. And the narrative that tired of the northerners and easterners, they controlled power, and we are taking this thing almost and Bantu-sized it. I was having a conversation with a beautiful friend of mine, a lawyer from Kigezi yesterday. And part of the conversation is how we can actually try to dismantle this entire. I've even forgotten actually that we have this show today as part of the conversation. Because I'm very concerned. We need to undo this mess. Museveni put it for 36 years. Number two, once the guy comes to power, on the bandwagon of Bantu, us versus them, he, by what he did in the north and east, including in your Teso, was primarily less chop. These guys who did it for us. Revenge, but revenge against the other. I'm not saying this don't exist. Entrenching identity politics as he came in. The near genocide that Olara Tunu will talk about in Nigeria built on the same foundations. Part of the experiences in West Nile. So extremely unfortunate. But back to really slightly where these things happened. At independence, granted, political parties emerged. DP had their own Uganda interest. I don't know how much you can go into that. But DP had its own issues, with, in particular, on the Catholic question in Uganda. But really, U.P.C should be credited with asking for a government of national unity, which DP refused to join. And to credit to Sir Edward joined, offered to join that. But according to what, and he told me this person, one of the things was the government of national unity is formed to deal with the major national challenge. We're a new nation, let's try to build together. And again, like Professor was saying, at that time, the outstanding issues were the lost counties, the status of Mbale town, whether Mbale is part of Bukedi or not, things like that. The issue of kingdoms versus others. Some young students,
And Rwenzori.
Some young students were asking me the other day why the government entrenched this thing of creating, is it governments of Teso, governments of Acholi, governments of Lango, where they know are kingdoms. I think these were challenges that governments of the time faced. And I'm raising them now because these are things that particularly we today, and particularly you younger generation, have to deal with it to ensure that we end up, that would be my conclusion, to end up with a nation in diversity, as Professor says, because these things exist everywhere, But how do we manage to live in harmony? Quickly, Professor of History, Professor Emeritus, now late, Professor Kenneth Ingham, autobiographer of Milton Obote. I met him at his home in Bristol. And that was after Obote had just died. And he was now an old man short before his own death. And one of the things he told me was that, in 1962, thereabouts, they had a discussion on the dilemma facing Uganda around identity and nationhood, where particularly Buganda could not come to terms with the reality of being a nation within a nation, but where the president, the leader of Uganda, is not a Mugandan, certainly somebody who's below, who's above the king. And I don't know what suggestion they'd given to Milton Obote. And Obote said this, and I'm bringing this for you young guys watching, that, Kenneth, you people will return to England. This is now Kenneth Ingham telling me. You people will return to England, but you will leave us here. So we need to find a solution of how, we will have to learn to live with each other. So meaning that the Ugandans, we need to find a solution of how we live together in diversity. So what leads? Government of National Unity, DP refuses. 1963, the Republican element, maybe, Professor, that's quite a bit of a conversation, where when they decided that we want the Governor General to go, but instead we should have a president, how they thought that the kings being elected by Parliament to become the symbolic leaders would sort out the situation. It seems to make sense, but maybe, hopefully, if they had chosen other elders who are not lead cultural leaders, maybe they pick prime ministers or cultural leaders, nominate individuals, maybe it would have worked. So that was that. But so attempts were made. But fast forward, as of 1969, there was an attempt, and I was listening to Bote's speech the other day. One of them was the idea that we should go for elections of 3 plus 1,
1 plus 3.
1 plus 3, which Professor has also talked about before. Making an attempt in which not only was it already the case that for me I studied in South College, that's why I'm Musoga, and it worked because the government builds schools, and other ones have not, build schools around the country and equipped schools. So you leave Nagongara and go to Kigezi, and there is a guarantee that whichever school U.P.C built for you guys in Kigezi will be as good for all the students, including those who's coming from Kotido. And government was attempting to do it, and it worked. But then the other thing was that when you go to for elections, you have to consider other regions. You have to be elected in other regions to become a member of parliament. So you sit as a member of parliament for the nation state, not only from your area. And then finally, somebody was the other day seated here and we were having another conversation. In U.P.C's elections for basically parliamentary candidate, the presiding officer for a parliamentary candidate for U.P.C in Terego would have to come from another sub-region, things like that. So this was trying to bring an element of cohesion. But that having been said, I think this is now political point scoring and basic. But in my case, I'm just clarifying issues. Going forward, I think the best way to deal with the imperativeness of identity politics is political parties built around values and ideologies. Yesterday, I was giving an international conversation with the students and youth actually at night. And part of it was to push this thing that the more we talk about politics of values, like for me in U.P.C, I would rather have Jeremy Corbyn become the district leader of Tororo than some corrupt, incompetent guy who's actually siphoning money, turning it back to go and equip another operation, whatever else is happening elsewhere. Things like that. Jeremy Corbyn is an old man of Britain, but absolutely, fundamentally, ideologically leftist-driven. His programs will transform this country. The same with an old man called Bernie Sanders. So it's not even about policy of youth versus old people, but values and ideologies. That is why it's extremely important, young Eyeru, whatever you guys do around NRA, make sure that NRA does not sink political competition, but encourages it in diversity, both conversations in NRA and conversations across the political divide. Political parties built around values deal and kill this. And that's why U.P.C, minus Soboti, you would see, for instance, the big names across the country, they really, the Kirundas with this word, granted the Rangangas with this word, the Babihas with this word. These are personalities across the world, across the country. In this NRA thing, until about 5 years ago, the top generals in the NRA were reported to have been people from the same sub-county. Now that is 36 years, 35, 30 years after these guys had come from the bush. Granted, Museveni claimed that the army was dominated by the North. Yes, it was. But was it a creation of the North? No, it was a creation of the British that Obote and everyone else were trying to correct. I think, final answer, governments driven with a conscious leadership to create situations and possibilities that kill patronage, like Milton Obote did. That Lango does not have the special privilege. That the special guaranteed nearest people to him, none of them is a Lango name. Maybe that will be the start going forward for those of us in politics growing, looking forward. Maybe those are the examples. And that is what Obote did in this country. Rwakasisi, Lulu Zakirunda were the loudest ministers in Obote's government, Obote too. The first Obote government, neither here nor. Things like that. But what brings us together? Build schools, build hospitals, create possibilities for which Museveni finishes the University of Dar es Salaam. Obote has no clue about him, goes to president's office, applies for a job. Wilson Okwenje Musami is a Musamian, who's the head of director of research in the president's office, picks Museveni and gives him a job in the president's office. That kills ethnic so-called identity politics, where it does not matter who you are. It's about the content of your character, the qualifications and the papers that you present, and the work that you do in this nation state. And that means, therefore, Ochieno Nagongera doesn't give a clue. Okay, whatever happens, because the district commission in Tororo is going to provide, when you go to the hospital, it does not matter who the director of medical services is there or not. It does not matter where they come from. The services there, and these things are guaranteed. It is about the politics. Politics will lead these things, and it has to be conscious, deliberate leadership. Obote provided it in Obote 1, provided it in Obote 2, provided it in exile. That's why I speak. The guy, I didn't know him. I didn't know him. Me, I was an ordinary little boy running around. I went to Makerere, Professor. By the time I went to Makerere, Obote was already in exile. So I went to London because of my decency from Miri, thanks to your grandfather's land in Busoga. I got noticed, and I reached where I am on merit. That is how we'll be able to deal with these things. But when we begin to consciously put humanity around these things, when we consciously remember that this country belongs to all of us in diversity, I'm not even sure it is necessary about intermarriage and things like that, but those all by and large help, because intermarriage, see what happens when genocide happened in Rwanda. See what happened when some of these things happened in Lechole. Actually, the one government, I know a couple that split because one person was agreeing with the Tetu Kellers and the others not, and they're from two different kind of identities. So these things are possible.
The conversation today would suggest that with the constant and the continuous intermarriages, then of course this issue of identity politics would be somewhere handled at that level, because the families will not easily.
No, honestly, no. I was saying that helps, but that's a simplistic argument. The big picture is how we consciously, politically not in political parties, how we consciously as leaders accept these things as realities that we're able to live together in diversity, But that's what brings us together as the nation state called the Republic of Uganda is when we kill corruption, when systems work, when institutions work, when there is a guarantee. And by the final point, actually, in 1984, Munyankole man helped me on my way to Kabale, to Katuna actually, in a pickup. I think I've told that story. That guy saw in me merely a young, vulnerable student where the train in which we were traveling had broken down. These things are cultural. Mr. Museveni either retires or he goes for some kind of cleansing and then wakes up a different person. Because he is directly responsible for these things. He can actually help lead the process in which there's an open Uganda in diversity, where it is really togetherness in fairness rather than picking and choosing people. Because actually, I know my sister is part of it.
And that's
but
what I wanted to bring
I know it's
in.
taken a very long time accepting this. Because one of these other things is he's now started playing politics of tokenism. You can come off from a choli. And if you're good, you're part of us NRA. We shall
have that conversation. Yes, I need to bring in Honorable Rose. Someone would, I need you to maybe direct us on whether this politics of identity, whether it unites or further divides us. Because it is interesting that we are seeing these sentiments coming off today. And we need to have these open conversations and honest conversations. And of course, critics of this politics of identity would say that when people really unite, people of common background unite, or possibly like that, would ignite or would propagate some of these politics of identity. Is it true or not?
Yeah. You know, where it amuses me is when we push it all to Museveni, it becomes a Museveni affair. No, I don't believe in ethnicity kind of identity politics. I don't believe in it. I just have one district, actually three, Yumbe, Koboko, and Maracha. At a certain time, they said, we don't want other people's children to work here. Let's have our own. But the fight broke between the sons and daughters, you know, who are from the same background and so forth. But I want to say that it's Museveni who has diversified this. Look at the ministers, look at the vice president, look at the prime minister, look at the intermarriages. Look at the way we interact.
Do people consult themselves when they are
Well, the exposure is from this time. We used yes, but of course he has done.
I don't want to combine it here, but there you go.
Yeah, but this is my experience. We gave you your time.
Please proceed.
Yeah, Museveni has done a lot. I just can say this because some of us, like me, I would have remained in my cocoon. I should have married a man who cannot afford a door, who should have been able to make a door out of reeds. I got a State House scholarship. I clearly said Abanya, who did a lot for U.P.C government from my home, died almost a pauper's death. Where was U.P.C? All this time he kept the documents of U.P.C house or Bode's house. They only appeared at his funeral. So, which government is better? Who was helping Abanya? Not us who have grown and known everything about NRM. So, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. There's a lot this government has done. It has groomed us. You know, if my husband is a Munyankole, for example, let's say that much as I'm not married, and my children will call the Banyankole the uncles. You mean I can the people of Terego will go and kill the other side? No. So that is the diversity.
They will do.
Definitely you find you have a breed there. That is when you have lost your consciousness, that you go there and you start killing your uncles. It doesn't make sense. So it is people-centered. There must be mindset change. People think in a bad way. It is not cladded onto one person or so and so. It has happened. Why did Idi Amin put Adris as the vice president? Did he have consciousness that this is Uganda, let's do it for everyone? Now, if he did it, at times it comes naturally. But can we fight it? Can we stop it? Can we see that this is Uganda, we are Ugandans, we must live a life of patriotism? And, you know, even ideological change, the president has tried. But you can take a cow to go and drink water, but once it refuses to drink water, what do you do? It's a wrong idea to practice the politics of ethnicity, but it depends on the people. At times, some of these employments are not necessarily by Museveni. The other day, I was in Parliament when it all came that, wow, in the office of Prime Minister, all were relatives. Did Museveni say anything about that? Did he say, now employ relatives? So people should really think for themselves and say, what I'm doing is wrong. Let's have everything on merit. Let's do things because of capacity. Let interviews be given and we pick the cream. Look at Nkumba University. It totally collapsed. Reasons, relatives, ethnicity. Until I think they have woken up. Because I follow it anyway. I finished from Nkumba. It was going to die. Was it Museveni who told them, now employ your relatives, uncles, cousins, sisters, and friends? So it is not Museveni. It is human weakness.
But you have said it is Museveni who has diversified.
Yes. And
as leader,
they have realized this during his regime. They were left because it's a private sector. But when they realize it's better, somebody else handles this university. Now they have got Munyankole, they have got Lugaras, they have got Acholis, they have got Baganda, but not on ethnicity. Once you go that direction, you crash. You crash, and it is wrong. As NRM, you know, I love my party. I say it
I can imagine that.
It is what has brought me here to sit among a few four men. Without that exposure, I would have been crushed. A village girl 311.
But I think also other governments did the same. Gave opportunities to many.
Well, I didn't know. I don't know.
Like of course Joseph says that he didn't know the president then.
My
but he was able.
U.P.C is my grandfather. I've told them I have not feared. If they were that good, how did they leave their own who kept the documents? To die in the worst hospital ever, no help.
I think those are isolated cases.
Because they were not in the government. Where would they get money to survive?
They have Uganda.
Those are isolated cases, and maybe then we can also point
the
on
ones
some
we are talking about
of what is
here are
happening
isolated
today.
also.
Yes, because we have quite a lot of people who've actually.
How many people are guarding 7 and are not Banyankole? Have you tried to come nearer those PGB?
It's not about
guys?
that, but we have people who are really discontented, people who really felt they pushed this government this far and are complaining publicly. We have quite a number.
And there are people who are dying for us who are
so it is not the issue of it is those isolated.
If you don't work hard.
Honorable is saying that there is a history,
yes,
and we appreciate it.
Yes.
And she's saying there are also natural progressions.
Exactly.
That people who come to power have people that are close to them, so they have access, and that is not a reserve of Uganda. That's it's not a reserve anywhere. Whether you look at Kenya,
it's human.
It's the way power progresses across the world. What she is saying is that it is the NRM leader who has put up a situation of saying, let's publicly speak about this. Let's publicly encourage a country that unifies. Let's publicly put up some semblance, which Professor is talking about, in diversification. That you and he mentioned this that when you make a rejoinder, you will. But when he was considering cabinet, he mentioned this. He said, no, you need to pick. Think about the other group. Think about this group. Think about that inclusion. Is what stops ethnic politics. It is what makes everyone feel a part of it. And you know, the more we grow as a country, the more everyone wants to see my personal growth. Because in the past, ethnic groups would live on their own in their own economies. Karamoja would be fine not being represented in parliament as long as their raids are going on fine. But today, the MPs. Yes, that's what I'm saying. But they didn't care less what the MPs were doing because they didn't need your roads. If anything, if you raid cattle and you use the road, you are giving off your security. So what they were interested in and what they are interested in now are different. Now it's about their livelihoods. Now it's about how much they can control and how much they can access. And in that situation, the policy of the NRM becomes the handy way of going forward.
Jacob, before you go far, we just saw a very, very live example, and the most recent example, where the team from Acholi were saying that the speaker position should be ring-fenced, and of course we even saw some of these comments coming from when we lost the Bank of Uganda governor, where someone was, of course, also saying the same thing that we should ring-fence. Are you saying that now this government is allowing for people to openly speak about and demand ethnically?
No, maybe
there was a precedent. And it came from the president. When president said, let's ring fence the East African member of parliament who died for Buganda alone, for the Baganda to participate, that was wrong precedence. So we wanted to show this, that if you allowed that, then allow this also. What is the, just as I said.
Thank you.
To bring in the question was mine. So let me also...
Representative government.
I disagree with the position of ring fencing anything in Uganda for any group, because the politics sorts out that situation. But I think what was happening in that time was that it had precedent, like they say, but it also was a moment of anguish, because they actually had lost a person of influence. And northern Uganda, it was not just they actually saying, it was the northern focus saying, yes, and they were all considering it. I disagree with the proposition, but I understood what they were saying. And I am glad we went beyond that to logic, because I wouldn't want to be in a situation where, when, God forbid, we lose the vice president, Teso says the next vice president must come from Teso. It will not propagate a Uganda that we all can live in.
But that's a possibility. I need to bring in, Professor. In this case, we are seeing these sentiments being pronounced today. Are they more of a political gimmicks? Is it part of extending the political patronage or something?
What I want to say is that the ethnic or identity question has been live since independence, and it is still there. The defense is notwithstanding. This Gambanogu, that is a street talk. It reflects what is on the ground. So the issue of this government has done this or this, I don't think that it has made anything less. Actually, you did say that NRM has brought it to the fore to be discussed. Is that so? I know when NRM came into power, it came up with the anti-sectarian law. Unfortunately, that law punishes the one who says it, who points it out, not the one who practices it. So practicing now has gone underneath. When you say there is a problem here, they say now you are sectarian, you are arrested. Instead of bringing it out so that people can discuss it. So we are hiding it. And that is very unfortunate. Let me make a comment about even appointing people from different areas. I'm now going to use some kind of simple philosophy. Political appointments are or should be algebraic, not arithmetical. I repeat, they should be algebraic, not arithmetical. Now, when you pick her and her from even the same tribe, and you pick me from one tribe, they are three. Doesn't mean they have more power of influence than I am because I'm one. In algebra, you cannot tell whether 2A is smaller than 5B unless you know the value of A. Because 2A could be more weighted than 5B depending on the value of B. That is algebra. So just picking somebody and factoring him in cabinet doesn't matter. You'll find that person in cabinet actually responds and respects and takes orders from the personal assistant. If not lower than the personal assistant. That you people are using arithmetic. We are talking algebra now. What is the weight of that person? We have had people in positions of responsibility in this country, of authority without responsibility. They fear actually, they bow down. They don't
know what is given to them.
They bow down.
That is individual weakness.
Individual weakness. No, it's not individual weakness. It is the system. It is systemic. It is not individual weakness.
No, it is shared responsibility.
With the victims.
Yeah, it is shared.
Can you listen to me? Can you listen to me?
Okay.
Do not be deceived by numbers of people who are appointed. You may find an army commander who cannot even command a section. And you find somebody who is a captain, is the army commander. That is a question of algebra. So let's go algebraic, not arithmetical. So that is the point I'm making here. Bring it down. Do people have authority? Are people given authority, or they are just factored in order to give a semblance that you are also in. Because that brings me to the question of appointments based on an individual from an ethnic group or a political party rather than bringing in the party as it is. Now, he said something, he didn't emphasize it, I'm going to emphasize it here, which I liked. We want unity in fairness. You are not going to preach unity and peace unless there is fairness. Fairness in all. In this country, I have said it several times, I will say it here. Today, or shortly before, even in this country, if you go to an office of 9 stories, yeah, and you don't know the ethnic group of the person on the 9th floor, but you have just entered on the 1st floor, just listen to the people on the 1st floor. The tea girl, the sweeper, the personal assistant, the bodyguard, they are all short-waving. Once you hear what they are short-waving, you will know who is on top, because normally the top executives are above. So as long as there is no fairness in recruitment, in sharing of national resources, of sharing scholarships, because we don't know how scholarships are given. State scholarships, even state house scholarships. We want to know justice. You can commit a crime or something, by the way, and go to jail depending on which ethnic group you come from. And you can get out of that one, even when you committed the crime, and you can get bail depending on where you come from. And somebody will not get bail depending on where he comes from. It is a question of unity in fairness practice. Forget about this issue of patriotism. You find somebody talking about patriotism when he's not patriotic. Actually, the highest singers of patriotism are not patriotic. They are the ones who are grabbing land. You tell me who is grabbing land. Yes. And they are the patriots. Who is grabbing scholarships? Who is grabbing tenders? Who is grabbing contracts? Who is grabbing land? Who is grabbing everything? They are the very people who are singing patriotism. Don't go by what people say. No. Go by what they practice. In Uganda here especially, they have a practice where when you enter in a room here, you find people saying, we are very happy to see you. And you take it for granted that somebody is happy, you have to go behind. When in our villages somebody says, you come and eat, and you start washing and eating. Was he meaning that you should be eating? Or when it is around 6, like it is coming to 6, and he says, you sleep, and you also sleep. They will say, look at the daughter of son. So we tell her to sleep, she also sleeps. Don't go by what is said. These narratives that we are patriotic, that we are liberators, that we are democratic, it does not follow that the Democratic Republic of Congo is necessarily democratic. The DRC, ironically, is not democratic. So we have to see the algebra. We have to see the algebra, not the mathematics. That yes, there is a vice president, there is a prime minister, when actually that person cannot make a decision who gets a contract to construct a road and who doesn't get it. That is what matters. So the question of unity in fairness, but technically speaking, in terms of political science, let me use another concept. We want pluralism. Pluralism means that you accept to live with somebody as he or she is, not assimilation. No. So you are not going to say that everybody should come here, coerce them by either force or coerce them with dangling some things. The president made a statement. I wish I could even meet him now. I would tell him to withdraw that statement. He made a statement recently, sometime recently. He said, we are going to give jobs to, they called it DRA, Descendants of Resistance Army.
Oh, DRC. DRA. Jacob. Are you DRA?
That we are going to give jobs past the DRAs. But the jobs, if it is a political job, that is acceptable. But if civil service job, public service jobs, all Ugandans pay the taxes, and they should be merit. So the issue of meritocracy, that is why we are underdeveloped, by the way. Let me repeat this one. Uganda is underdeveloped, not because of NRM only, since the past, because of not allocating jobs based on merit, but based on wanawani, who do you belong to? Which party do you belong to? Are you an OB? Do you come from this tribe? Do you come from this region? That is why Southeast Asia, although it is under authoritarian, it developed under authoritarian regimes.
Much quicker.
They were meritocrat. They used the meritocracy. That you complete at the university, you get a first class, government goes there to look for all first classes and comes and gives them scholarships and promotes them. Today, or in the recent past in Uganda, actually since independence, you go and get a pass degree. You get a job before a first class gets it.
But you know
You get it because you are connected.
No.
I think we need to break
No,
off for
yeah, but have you realized that those who have got even past degree performance is better than those who have first class?
Don't we have
so many?
Don't we have people of past degrees who have been employed in the government before those of first class in Uganda today?
Yeah,
because of Mwanawani. Because of we are the sons
which is unfortunate. It's
now
unfortunate.
that is unfortunate, and unless we reverse that one,
yeah.
Nyerere created a nation using that one. He had unity in fairness under Ujamaa. Now he may have made mistakes in economic policy planning, but that is why he's remembered and he's a candidate of being a saint, to be a saint. And those who didn't do what he did, even if they developed their countries, they are not called, they are not candidates of being saints. Is it based on meritocracy or is it based on patriotism, which is lip service? Nyerere believed what he did. He would go and line up at a bank to get money to borrow from the bank to pay fees for his child. That is why partly, actually his son was a member of opposition, was an MP of opposition before he went back at CCM. He was a member of opposition. I want to imagine Kailerogawa being a member of NUP.
There's a tweet that came out actually from one of the MPs saying that the appointment of RDCs came with some hefty kind of money that people have paid, and even slotted a figure of 20 million. So meaning that now
Honorable Kabanda did not sit on the committee.
I don't know. So now there's that rumor.
Those ideas of Manuka.
We have these conversations coming off.
But in reality, finally, in reality, in Uganda is that appointments are still based on identity politics, and however much you talk against identity politics, as long as there is unfairness in allocation of public resources, whether it is land, whether it is jobs, whether it is scholarships, whether it is justice, you will have identity politics whether you like it or not.
Interesting. Well, let's have this short break, and of course, when we return, we're going to have this conversation again. I see Joseph, you need to have the take.
No worries, no worries.
And let's have this break, and please, let's follow this conversation we are on CivicSpaceTV YouTube, and subscribe to be part of this conversation. Let's see in your comments there. Let's follow. Let's be part of this conversation. It's heated up here. And of course, on our hashtag on Twitter, the CivicSpaceTV, but also the chat show UG. The conversation is happening, people are commenting. You should also be part of this conversation. Let's try to see and dig down and dig deep and understand where the problem is, and of course, probably provide solutions. And we'll have the second part of this conversation. We'll have a topic on DRC. But let's have this short break and return.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on CivicSpaceTV online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. CivicSpaceTV, freedom always.
Welcome back from that short break, and the conversation still continues on our YouTube channel, the CivicSpaceTV, and on Twitter we on the hashtag #ChatShowUG and CivicSpaceTV hashtags on Twitter. Kindly be part of this conversation. The discussion here is interesting, it's energized, and of course with a little sentiments in there, but which is understandable. And I would want to bring in Ndugujo, and on the panel I'm joined by Ndebesa, Jacob, Joseph, and Rose, who are honorable, who are helping us understand this topic and these issues around the country. Joe, you had your take. on this. I just want to invite you in about 2-3 minutes.
No, I'll make it less.
Including Rose, then we go to the next, second topic.
No, I'll make it less. No, I think this is a very emotive issue. And amazingly, you suddenly realize when Professor was giving us the lecture earlier, I was saying that, shall I say half that? And then you suddenly realize that you want to be sort of in the flow. The relative advantage Professor and I have, without prejudice, is a little bit of lived experience over a period of these times. And then, of course, different kind of sources of information beyond mainstream literature. But also, on the other hand, the drive to encourage our colleagues who follow us that genuinely there is a possibility for this country in diversity, as Professor quite rightly says. The problem, though, is that
unity in fairness.
In fairness. But the problem is that we have had a bit of victor's history in this country, where I think even about now, political leaders like myself don't find it very easy, and it's a challenge to myself, to allow objective truth to prevail. But when it comes to this, I'm not quite sure it's anything for which we necessarily need to win point score. The truth is that the subject we're discussing today is one that is going to definitely critically determine whether or not their grandchildren are able to grow the Southeast Asian way in 100 years' time successfully. And so for that, I think we need to make sure that we try as best as we possibly can to get ourselves informed around the root causes of these issues, the contextual recent history of these other things, and how best the realities we're facing today, including the politics of the 11th floor and who's down on the ground floor, as Professor says, are going forward. Beyond that, very quickly, I just want to re-summarize, but in context. I know my sister Rose was referring to a situation of family nature, which we're going to be discussing away from the screen. But that was actually one of the things that we're saying, that when we reach a situation in which services provided by the state, a head of state comes and says that you voted wrongly, for example. It's just about identity.
You committed suicide,
you committed
actually.
suicide, something like
that.
It causes problems. So that's one. So to me, that is part of the problem. When you reach a situation in which a hospital that U.P.C built, I'm not point scoring, a hospital that was built within 8 years, and they built many big and equipped, and it functions. 35, 36 years later, they hardly exist. Those are some of the issues. It is the lack of some of these other things where people begin to look for, to scramble for the little, where perhaps the entrenchment of issues to do with me, myself, and I, what is around my corner, and who then is the nearest? Is it my brother, my sister, or is it somebody with whom I have a linguistic commonality? So my view is this, that I think let's provide the leadership that we want, but let's provide the leadership that we hope to see going forward in future. Yes, at the moment, Museveni's track record, because I saw it there, from Mwiri. I first saw him in 1980 when they were campaigning for leadership, where I was lucky enough, I saw Museveni, I saw Semugera, I saw Milton Obote, and I made my choice. And most of us made our choice on the basis of what actually they presented to us. As students. No, Manja Kanyi didn't come, but the three of them came. And so we made our choices of leadership with them. So from then on, I've been following, in my columns, I've actually said that recently when I had a power cut and I missed my Sunday column because of power cut, the following week I wrote of how Mr. Museveni promised us that if that you can provide energy through cow dung, and was telling us this is dung here. I don't want to demonstrate on your screen. And I say this guy talked about this thing in 1980. He has had a privilege, of 36 years, and there is still power shortages at Kampala, and we own Lake Victoria and River Nile. Things to do with those resources, conflicts around resources and earnings, and maybe that's where, to an extent, Jacob is right. That possibly, in many cases, the slightly much more educated we are, in terms of education, and slightly much more exposed we are, in many cases, in diversity, the more likely possibly tolerant. But in Uganda today, the worst guys are the guys with power at the top, as I say, they start from the top, where it's almost a family business, and then you go to the richest guys, are possibly the best at presenting this. So maybe I'm contradicting myself, but generally, when you now go down to schools, universities, things like that, you'll realize that young people, that's why the hope is around young people. Young people meeting in commonality and diversity will tend to be much more tolerant and indeed progressive. I've told youth forum that the youth are actually usually the most progressive, forward-going, and versus their parents about the fear of the unknown. So maybe the youth of this country need to review what is going on today, but they already do that through reading, through listening, through challenging, and through debates like this. Maybe next time you have organize a special show where the young people, relatively his group and age group and younger, and we get experiences. Problem is that the other day I was listening to a special program in which there are 4 young lawyers, and all of them simply did not have the context of history of this country, and they're discussing constitutional history of this country. So in other words, Victor's history.
Yeah, interesting, Joseph. Honorable, I want to give you the last take, maybe, on whether we possibly at the point where we can work past this politics of ethnicity.
Exactly. What Ugandans all need to do, joint effort to get patriotic, mindset change, because if people are given positions of authority, they usurp power and use it wrongly. Corruption is not one man's issue. Ugandans, once they see money, they develop hysteria. They are never satisfied. People should learn to live within their means and get satisfied. Once we do that, we think about Uganda as for Ugandans collectively, not this thing of, am I a Munyankole, am I a Lugwara, who can I push nearer, then we can grow. It is not an issue of Museveni. It's an issue of Ugandans who are in authority, who have been given chance to employ others and become selfish and self-centered. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting, Honorable. That's a short one. And of course, it drives us off that politics, and we need to get into now the regional integration, where we have DRC joining the bloc. Now I think we have about 7 countries that are in the bloc, and of course now that gives us almost a population of over 300 million people today into the whole bloc. And it is at that point DRC first applied in 2019 to be part of the bloc. I think so. So I want to bring in again our historian, the senior East African, to give us, possibly because our listeners out there would want to know how, when the DRC come in, but also importantly, what are the benefits for why we are now excited with having DRC join the bloc.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this topic, which is dear to my heart, because I'm an East African. I'm an East African living in the province of Uganda. However, that will be a reality that is likely to be achieved very many years to come. But what are the goals of regional integration in East Africa? I think at times integration is done as a fashion. We have to be very serious, more serious than this. So in principle, regional integration is very much beneficial to us in Africa, who were balkanized by the Berlin Colonial Conference. So if we could now think of working together to solve common problems together, that would be very great. But at times, it is done as a fashion. Now, one of the principles of East African community is that it is people-centered. And private sector driven or something like that. But is it really people-centered or it is state-centered? Because all these things, whether you have included the DRC, is decided by our leaders and not the citizens. So there is a very big challenge. You are talking about 300 million people maybe. But 300 million, what is their purchasing power? What is the purchasing power of those? Because one country like Belgium, which might be about 12 million, could be have the purchasing capacity of all the 300 million people. We need to develop. But going to the basics, my take is that the imperative of security should take precedence even over trade and economic integration. The challenge, the problem of the East African, of the Greater X region now, East African community is almost becoming the Greater X region. The problem of underdevelopment and the problem of lack of welfare in the region is now much more of insecurity than lack of economic development or even lack of manpower or womanpower, whatever you want to call it, for sparking development. If this integration can bring the dividend of peace, it would do a great job. But to do that, you must look at the issues of governance. The East African community, as driven by Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, has been such that they are opportunistic. They are looking at opportunistic. They are opportunistic. Kenya is looking at this region because it is richer than any other. It is looking at the market within the region. Uganda has been the most vocal and pushing, but there are those who say maybe Museveni wanted to be the president of East Africa also. Tanzania has been reluctant even to join the East African community because it thinks the rest are going to come and take over their land because they have got a lot of land. So I think that we need to rethink this project of East African community. This East African community began in 1999, effectively 2000. It is now over 22 years. It's around 22 years now. The first East African community began in 1967 and broke up in 1977. But it was very more meaningful to the lives of the people than this one, which has lasted 22 years. There was integration of harbors. There was common examinations. There used to be East African community examinations. There was common posts, common airlines, common this and this services, which at first even there was a common currency, which translated into the lives of the people and made more sense. But now we seem to be following fashion. And one way of integrating which would be meaningful and would be made possible is to have also, because to have peace, you must have common norms of governance. Now, we don't have common norms of governance. And let me tell you, some of you may not have been reading East African community processes. About 12 years ago, more than 12 years ago, the East African Community Secretariat, after consultations, came up with the good governance protocol. There is a draft. You can go to Arusha and find it on the shelves. The Council of Ministers and the Presidents and the Summit have refused to ratify it, to pass it, because it was touching on issues of governance. It was touching on issues of electoral commissions, independent electoral commissions. It was touching on human rights issues. Now, we would, if you compare us with European Union, Europe is not a mere geographic expression. It has got a lot of meaning. And to join the European Union, if you are a new member, they first look at your governance norms. They first look at your electoral systems, your civil liberties, how you observe them. They look at human rights record. They look at those issues to do with governance before you can become a family of European Union with certain democratic credentials. Now, in East Africa, sorry to say, this is my opinion, people are free to object to it, we are integrating authoritarianism. We are integrating militarism. In Europe at one time, they were forming alliances in the 19th century, and somebody remarked, but this is an unholy alliance, because that was an alliance of monarchies who wanted to monopolize power. So unless we put in place good governance issues, transparency, accountability, free and fair elections, justice, fairness, and so those things, so that the whole of East African community is governed under certain governance norms and principles, both in writing and in principle, we shall have an East African community that will not benefit the people, because democracy has also dividends to fairness and equality, because you have checks and balances in good governance. Now, coming to bringing in the DRC. Before that, we brought in South Sudan. When South Sudan came in, we started trading with Sudan. People were doing very well. Are they doing very, very well now? Is that sustainable? just to come to bring in a member without looking at their governance principles and their democracy principles is not sustainable. We have just brought in Congo. Kisekedi hasn't gone for another election. The election that brought him into power had the whole of Eastern Congo. They didn't vote. I hope members are aware, those who are listening to me. The whole region didn't vote. Now all of a sudden, you say you also come. I'm told they are going to bring in Somalia. Sudan has also applied. And it is like a fashion. You just accept somebody without saying, wait a minute. Do we have principles upon which this community is going to be built? But who will question that? Who will bring out that? When the protocol for good governance has been shelved just because these leaders in the South African community don't want to be held politically accountable by the citizens. So unless we move away from fashion, but also, finally, I want to say security is very important. By the way, European Union, on the surface, it looks as if it was a trade and economic union. No. It was after the Second World War for fear of having another war in Europe. So can we have security integration in East Africa? But this security integration, to be sustainable, must be informed by good governance, fairness, equality of all people, and citizen real participation. Not just saying that, you know, this is a citizen-based integration and private sector led. When actually the East African community integration is led by the states, they are just saying it is us, citizens, who are leading. In my language, they say that you can put you can put just dregs of millet or sorghum or something on something for those which like it to come and peck you. So they are putting dregs on us. We, the citizens, citizen-led. When it is state-led, which citizen was there when Congo was being accepted? Were you there? And you're a citizen. Were you there? Were you there? Were you there? So we don't know who has brought this Congo here. We don't know who brought in
you trusted the president
South Sudan,
with your
but they say citizen-led
role
and citizen-based and private sector. You cannot have an integration led by the private sector. An integration is led by the states, but those states must be seen to be democratic enough and considering good governance. Short of that is just Chiwang.
I want to bring in Jacob. Professor is deflating our excitement. I would want you to just
I've remained excited.
The possible benefits of such additions, especially for DRC.
No deflation
vast
here.
space and the resources and all this that is being talked about. What would be the benefits?
Thank
and
you.
especially even for the young people.
Thank you. I think we share the East African identity with Professor. I just need to know that I was more optimistic than Professor here. Professor is analytical and
I'm East African.
and in Africa, when you're analytical on progress, you might end up in pessimism. I want to start here. There is nowhere in the world where progress has been built on pessimism. And to be honest, all development around the world has been built on the single principle of sheer faith.
You have a history.
I'm coming to that.
We are going to build
Whether it was whether it was in going to unknown lands of Africa to colonize them, where no one has ever been, people who came did not know our languages, did not know our weapons, came and interacted with us, and there was a plan that arrived at us being colonized, whether it was in Eastern Asia and the creation of the Asian tigers that created a market potential of cheap labor, but in fact national output being increased. When you're looking at South Korea, when you're looking at Malaysia, all those economies that were agrarian but developed a policy that was aggregating output as a measure of building economic progress. I think that optimism of let's find something that works is what we lack in Africa. And I think that's where President Museveni's voice has come out very strongly. What in Africa is growing? Because you have nations that have literally no control of anything therein. They have presidents that have no power geopolitically in terms of the world political frame. And they are existent as humans in their own right, but they are not making any progress in terms of their identity as one. And I think that is where the African continent has decided that we need to make steps. And when it comes to East Africa, I can tell you without a shadow of doubt that the East African community has been the most progressive and now a referential community across the world on progress, especially on trade. I need to start from there, especially on trade. East Africa has made the fastest progress and the deepest progress on entrenching integration along trade issues. If you proceed to say now, what is the ultimate goal of the community? It is not just to say that we want to trade with each other. No. President Museveni presents 3 reasons why we integrate. But I just want to say, for me as a young person, it's about the future of the politics of the world that I witness every day on our screen.
Jacob, right there. We could have this progress on trade in paper, but not in reality, because we are seeing quite a lot of
my brother
of fights and
yes,
happening and stretching over years.
And that is why I want to respond to Professor that you cannot base integration on a single political profile. You cannot. It has not happened anywhere successfully. If you are going to integrate nations, you must appreciate inherent differences in the historical political frameworks of those nations that is now the penetrated political establishment, whether you're talking about Sudan or South Sudan, even Kenya and Uganda. If we are to say Uganda 30 years ago, the political framework that was working here would not be the same one that would apply in an integration situation of now. Why? Because of the deviation from the politics of a two-party system, a near two-party system, to now a politics that is more multi-party. When you go to Kenya, it's a different situation. It's not just a politics of a multi-party system. It is also an absence of military presence in the politics of the day. So when you are integrating, there are many others. And what I'm saying is that there is a marketplace. What I am saying is essentially that you need to appreciate that there are differences and make a choice, either to be pessimistic about these people coming together and say we have a goal that we want to reach, let's try to move there together, or be optimistic and say you are different, you are disabled, I am differently abled, let us come together and see how we reach the finishing line. The finishing line of the East African community is four-staged and it is clear. It is a common market, a customs union, a monetary union, and a political federation. By all measures,
now it is confederation.
No, I'm going to explain that. By all standards and measures, the goals are very clear. So when someone is ascending to the Ascension Treaty of the East African Community, the Treaty for the Establishment, they are ascending to a process that is clarified in Article 12 of the treaty. When you proceed to say that we are here, then you come into another section of the treaty that talks about people being at different levels and therefore taking matters at the different levels, which is variable proportions. If we are, and that is why now the community has agreed to fast track a confederation first before a political federation. Because a political federation, again, the conversations there would touch on which political system do you have, which governance system do you have, and that will delay the need for Africans to unite. So a confederation is saying, no, we have agreed that trading together is important, and we have systems that can permit integration on trade. Let's first do that. We have agreed that defense is important.
Is that integration or cooperation?
No, that is also confederation. We have agreed that trade is important, security. Let us deal with the issue of Eastern Congo, which can't vote, in a joint way, because we are cooperating on trade and security. That approach, which says we are committed to reaching here, but because of our disabilities, some will run while others walk. So the pace we have to take is the one who is fast in walking should walk at the pace of the disabled persons pushing the wheelchair. I think that is a commendable way of progressing. So there are benefits, and they have been there enormously. But there are challenges notwithstanding, because you will see that the political differences, and again, this is because the action of integration has been largely at the top. But I'll tell you that if we are to choose that the people determine the pace of integration, consulting and so on, you will take 100 years before you agree on the next level. It is easier to commit nationals to a process as heads of state who are empowered by the nationals to work on their behalf, and they toe that line and safeguard the future of Africa, than to wait for the poor peoples of Africa to access the infrastructure of education that is not present anywhere in Eastern Congo, and make them globally competitive to reason at the same level with a fellow in Nairobi. And that is why in my final statement I'll say, for sure, it is important, and this is in historical context. Why did we have a fast-paced East African integration between 1960?
I'm going to give you history.
1960 and 1970. It was simple. It was because Mwalimu Nyerere was president. It was because Dr. Obote, who was a very close friend of Mwalimu, was president, and they were making decisions quicker. The reason it was compromised in progress was because President Kenyatta had a problem with the idea of losing the authority he had over Kenya and surrendering it to this grand idea. Yet in his calculation, and of course if you go to Kenya you'll understand, there was a bigger move to own much of the resources from the British and control them in person, and not in country as a whole, what they called holding in trust. So for me, any attempt by the heads of state to take us further and to unite us faster would be better. If the East African Federation reaches Egypt and touches down to Harare, that would even be perfect. Why? Because I know that we are building a stronger community in how the East African community is progressing, and we'll have a stronger voice. The challenges of the African Union today are that it is not hinged on that creation. It is simply a hereditary process that heads of state come in, and they are elected and they are members of the African Union. But when we need to take critical decisions, they are best stronger on regional integration than on continental integration. Whether you're looking at ECOWAS, whether you're looking at SADC, whether you're looking at the East African community.
Interesting. I need to bring in Ndugu Joseph, and I know you'll have a lot to talk about the history of this integration and vis-a-vis today. Especially on the politics of it, the politics of the time between Nyerere and Obote that allowed the integration to move almost to where people say was the best, and the politics of today. Where are we?
I think I'll leave part of that actually to Professor deliberately on this occasion, because these are really generally rather emotive issues, and my worry is that they're as important as the killing of one state and creation of other states as one bigger unit, and we are doing it in such a manner that the poor ordinary citizens who are with the people are actually left behind, and they're not a party to it. And it's not about political point scoring. So absolutely not. So I beg to disagree fundamentally with my young friend here. You know, number two, you extended integration towards Zimbabwe. Which means all of a sudden you are nearly reaching Addis Ababa. And immediately you reach Addis Ababa to talk the African Union, then it sinks there. So, you know, are we emphasizing a possibility of a strong regional bloc where we have a permanent, powerful regional bloc? Or are we the groups of African nations, where in diversity we are hoping, and as young guys like you normally would be much more open Africanist and progressive, saying that we can't wait for a Pan-Africanist nation state built on this foundation. If it is for the latter, then I'm afraid it's okay for you. But for the former rather. But if it's for the latter, then I'm actually, it's a contradiction. You're wrong. You're wrong because actually, as Professor says, the regional, in terms of context of your question, whether or not it was about the relationship between Nyerere and what, to an extent, that helped substantially. But really, in principle, it was about 3 nation states seeking a process, a systematic process. Parliaments were involved. By and large, you would not say perhaps the people were as much involved as it would be today. But if you think about it, that actually these were democratic parliaments, and I don't know which parliament in East Africa today is democratically elected. Certainly, and meaning in which head of state goes to sit there. Museveni doesn't go down there, in my opinion, with the mandate of Uganda. Of course, there's a fact in terms of what happened last year, including how Museveni came to power. Because Museveni came to power without a mandate of anybody in 1986. So if I may say so. But that said, what would normally happen as a process? Professor, we and I were having a conversation. I think you were away preparing your new future, and we're discussing how the East African community of the time, actually, Jacob, was the darling of the European Union format. In fact, I remember finding a magazine that I still hope I own somewhere, where Ted Heath, the then British Prime Minister, was boasting how they killed the East African community because they believed that the East African community, if it became successful, if it went to the next stage, particularly with the leaders intact, that it would be too difficult for them to penetrate. So it is good, it's important to do these things properly. The European Union process uses what they call the convergency criteria. In order, as Professor said, in order for the 3 original East African countries to receive a new member, that new member needed to meet a very specific criteria. It did not happen in Rwanda, did not happen in Burundi, has not happened in Sudan, has not happened in Congo. And while these are my relatives, I reject the informal source of relationship the way it is being done. It's almost like marriage by force, But in principle, this is what we want. So what I am amalgamating when there is no sense of commonality, number one. Number two, actually that we're doing it in the year 2022. Unlike possibly the 60s and 70s, where some of these issues about democratic accountability is neither here nor there. There is absolutely no reason where the National Youth Council does not have a debate, carry out this process instead of giving, carry out this process around the country and engage the citizens of our country that, you are living here in Toro, but actually there's another country called Congo, although it may not be as democratic as its name, but they want to join us as part of this African community, And we clap because Museveni met with these other guys, maybe even via Zoom, and said, bring it here because I want to send my troops down to Eastern Congo, regardless of the economic benefit you're going to have. I don't think that is really what we should be talking about in the year 2020. But in principle, it should be a good idea. The timing, terribly bad. In fact, it happened in such a manner that I don't know how many people in Busoga, I don't know how many people, even in Kabale, in Kisoro, knew what was happening beyond the leads in town. So, I don't believe that I would necessarily have voted for South Sudan joining. But to take you back, another thing, minus going to engage rural people in Terego or in Chinoni, in the very least, let established political parties take the question of integration as a political subject. That at the next election, we are saying that Congo is made an application, and before Congo is admitted, the various established political parties take positions on this. I don't know what NUP's position is on this matter. I have an idea about U.P.C, but I don't know what U.P.C's formal position is because we've never had discussion about it, regardless of whether or not you talk about the leadership thing. I know you take a swap at me on this and things like that. But so generally, these are things that should be discussed by the people. These are things that should be discussed by political parties and organizations, and they take positions. And these are things that should be discussed by the national parliament, where, if possible, in my opinion, it should actually involve something as close to a referendum as possible. It hasn't happened. So I think it's an integration of dictatorships, really, rather than an integration of our people. Now, to do so, particularly at a time when Rwandan border, I don't know how open and efficient it is now, but up to the other day, we couldn't. To do so in a situation in which every other week we have issues.
Actually, the Rwanda-Burundi border is closed.
Yeah, Rwanda border is still closed. When we have issues with Kenya, where Kenyans...
Is Rwanda-Tanzania open?
Yeah. It was not closed.
It was not.
But it has challenges.
Yeah. So these are things that actually, these are important things that need to be ironed out. But to suggest that actually, you've got a wound, but forget about that, we can actually go ahead and begin jumping and then create more. It's neither here nor there.
Interesting, Joseph. I want to, Honorable Rose, almost Terego is towards those border districts.
Sudan and Congo.
I think from that perspective, you would really bring in the real life experience and how people react towards or have reacted towards this news, because then maybe possibly we would be discussing at a point of elitism, but then the traders out there are actually either jubilating or actually cursing in this way. What are people saying? Maybe I don't know whether you've been there from when this news came through.
Thank you so much. I really can't fail to express my excitement, especially as who live at the border with both Congo and Sudan. I can tell you this part of Ariwara, this other extreme part of Congo, have never seen Kinshasa. They're better off with the Arua and Kampala. The faster Arua city grows, the better for Congolese and Sudanese. And now with this integration, we get a lot of business opportunities. By the way, the business levels in Arua, West Nile, is far higher than what people are playing with in the city center. The amount of goods that leave for West Nile and Congo, the roads are so bad, but there is an abundant market. Now, look at food. We buy food from, whether there is another small trading center in Congo called Kampala. All trucks from this side go that side to bring food, fresh food, not adulterated, not GMOs, but they're as huge as these produced under GMO. So, we have been stuck with sugar in Uganda, yet Congolese love sugar like nothing. So, it's a blessing. It's a big blessing. Yes, nothing comes on a silver platter. There may be challenges or pockets of issues here and there, but this does not mean it is wrong to have this. We have seen how much security situation in Congo took us at all on Uganda. All robbers will run inside Congo. They come, look at the ambulance of our hospital, brand new. It was taken to Congo, cut. And because there was no integration to get this ambulance, people were able to locate it, but it was dismantled and messed, assuming it was already part of East Africa. It would have made a lot of sense. A lot of traders of Uganda, especially Arua boys, have lost colossal amounts of money to Congolese. You can't enter the impenetrable forest. But now, if it is free like this, who are you, Uganda? Now we are East African. Yeah, you see, Congo has been in the dark world. It has been under the French in its own world. Bringing your brother to light is good, so that we take civilization to the next level. If you have capacity,
who is uncivilized? That's subjective.
Yeah, but of course, you look at what they're going through. Yeah, have you watched the most remote parts of of Congo? Congo is in another world altogether. The roads are impassable. You drive a lorry through water. At least the bad Museveni you are talking about has reached with bridges up to even the last part of Terego. But Congo, if we don't help Congo as Africans, as East Africans, then definitely we don't wish well for humanity. Then what human rights are we talking about? They have a right to decent livelihood, clothes, everything now can be taken to Congo. And we shall be able to manage Koni in Garamba, these other rebel groups that come to kidnap and kill and run away. Even if this is a planned move, we are able to reach the base. There is always something good that comes out of
but
the
maybe
process.
one would ask, is the integration in the favor of the people, or it is for a few? Because in that case where you're talking about human rights and all these sort of things.
Yes, it's for the people. There are only a few people who think, who have been blindfolded, I don't know by what.
Yeah, but also there cannot be integration for heads of state. There is
It
nothing
can't.
possible.
We elected
present to
them.
share.
But
Even
There
if
is
you are
nothing possible
U.P.C,
present.
your president now is Museveni. Even if you don't believe in Museveni, Professor, he's your president.
I told you I don't believe in
Museveni rules Uganda.
Now, that is it.
No, but just very briefly.
Yeah, he has to sign on your behalf, not to collect every dick and Harry.
Okay, let me Dr. Then Joseph to come. Yes.
Thank you very much. I think we are discussing at variance. I did not say that there are no potential benefits of East African integration.
No deny, yes.
But my sister here seems to be saying that I was saying there are no potential benefits. That's not what I'm saying. She says she's excited about including Congo. You are as excited as people in Katuna. They are now crying.
And me of
Toro
Malaba.
They are
yes.
crying because the business was killed. If I can use that English. Because of the closure of the border between Uganda and Rwanda. So the point I'm making, if for example, let me use the analogy of marriage. If you get married, like East Africans got married in 1967, and then divorced in 77, you again remarry without addressing the problems on the way. You simply remarry, you will divorce again.
You've realized each other's weakness, and now you have decided
and you will cry more, you will cry more, you will be more desperate, you will even commit suicide. You would rather remain divorced than remarrying before you have addressed the challenges or which led you to divorce. Because there you will be emotionally more injured. You would rather be injured worse. Now, I come to him.
It depends.
He said that I'm pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic. Maybe I'm skeptical.
Okay.
When you are moving to Jinja, it is better to know the challenges, the humps, everything you meet on the way from here to Jinja than simply going because you have to go to Jinja and because you have heard there is business there and then you are robbed on the way. You don't reach Jinja, you could even be killed. Not that there are no benefits of getting business opportunities in Jinja, but that you must be skeptical. Now, you challenged me that in history, I am taking you to history. Europe is where it is, I think, most importantly, because of the Age of Enlightenment. Have you ever heard of the Age of Enlightenment? That challenged the status quo of absolute monarchies in Europe. Are we together? Now, the Age of Enlightenment, all these Rousseaus and all these other challengers, philosophers, they were skeptical. I don't know whether you have done research at a certain higher level.
No.
You see, when you are doing research, there is what they call problematizing the issue. Okay. You have to say, I am going to research the East African integration. You first say, what is the problem? Yes, you want East African integration, but what is the problem of integration? You first be skeptical. And if you are not skeptical in research, like say you are doing master's or PhD, they will not pass your research proposal. You must first see the problems and then identify the problems and then you do find out how to overcome the problems. No, not me. I told you I'm an East African without apology.
Even me.
I want East African community. I want the coming of Congo. But all of us must first identify the challenges of the divorce that took place in 1977 and not repeat the same mistakes because we are just moving, because it is fashionable, because we have had others have joined. You say that East Africa is better than ECOWAS, for example. ECOWAS has addressed security. It contributed to peace in Sierra Leone, in the Gambia. What have we contributed? Sudanese are dying here. Yeah, Burundians died the other time. You don't know who is going to die next. No. We have had genocides here. We cannot intervene just because
NATO is not helping.
No, that's a different case. So, what am I saying? I am not in any way suggesting that there are no benefits of East African integration. I am saying there are economic benefits, there are human rights benefits, there are security benefits. You can talk about very many benefits, but to reap those benefits, to reap those dividends, we must first remove the obstacles that are likely to stop us from reaping those dividends. But don't be recklessly optimistic. When you are recklessly optimistic, You would rather be pessimistic. If you are reckless, you will fall in the ditch and you will die.
not.
You would rather remain outside of the ditch and stop at the
Taken
cliff
care.
rather than falling there. As I talk, I repeat, you said you are excited. The Katuna
Yes.
people in Kabare were excited. They are now crying. I don't know the border of Rwanda and Burundi. People who were excited, they are now crying. So I saw the Basoga here crying when their sugar cane could not go to Kenya. So nobody is against integration, but it must be integration that, not a purpose. The purpose could even be
Crying
there.
is normal.
But we have to remove
Eh,
the
but there must
obstacles
be
on the way so that we have a sustainable integration. It is not enough to have an integration and again we break it. In 1967 there was excitement like she has. In 1977 there was mourning. Should you divorce and remarry again without addressing why you divorced? That is my
we need
question.
to ask Joseph.
That is the question.
Joseph,
who is
and
mourning?
also we are almost at the producer saying
Yeah.
that our time is
Yeah.
fast spent, and yes, we need to
Indeed, I couldn't put it any better, really. As Professor is saying, for you guys, you are East Africans. For me, like my elder brother, Mbeki, I am an African. So I'm a holistical African, in fact, such a Pan-Africanist that I actually believe in the bigger African nation state. But that's a slightly different thing. But like being said, it has got to be systematic, stage by stage. You deal with the foundations, you meet all the criteria, you're all satisfied, your citizens satisfied. In fact, they know what the whole thing is all about. So that's number one. But number two, very quickly, the point about actually access to Congo, say via West Nile and others, that is absolutely true. We'll go back to the historians, we'll simply say that, well, we've been one people and we've traded anyway, after we just cut into piece, for generations to come. These are what, if we have sensible guys in Entebbe, these are what you deal bilaterally. If there is an issue in Malaba, with a neighboring state which is not a member state, you have bilateral relations. That's what has happened, and you create deals. In this is absolutely true. There is no reason why for all this time people in West Nile did not have reasonable access to Congo, or whether there are no formalities between the two, or whether it's via West Nile or indeed in Western border. And so you do not necessarily need to meet this. We still continue, if we can get visas, to go to Belgium and get visas to go to Seattle, why can't our ordinary people be able to go and trade locally? Well, these are done through trade deals, through diplomatic means, and through legal formalities. We don't have to we've now become Europeans, that's why we are traveling, or Americans, that's why we're traveling to Illinois. So really, for me, I was saying, we just want a process which is done open, transparent, with the people as much as you possibly can, but one which at the end of the day is going to be sustainable.
Interesting. Thank you very much. And I would want to finally close with
Thank you.
Jacob.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I recognize that I am the least experienced in life here. But I'd say that Pan-Africanism, in the sense of the great Kwame Nkrumah, the great so-and-so, does not make sense to my generation. And
It doesn't.
It does not
Not
make
at all.
sense to my generation.
not the-
Their pressing
living in
need,
the current
okay,
world.
is not fighting colonialism and white supremacy as it's presented.
Now get the context.
Their pressing need is in their daily bread.
And democracy.
No, not entirely. And this is a mistake that we're continuing
good
to make.
governance.
Okay, perhaps. Perhaps. And which doesn't mean democracy, but thank you.
Yeah.
So the in that sense, and this is a conversation that was starting this year, that I am going to lead the conversation of bringing African youth leaders to Uganda to discuss about the future of Pan-Africanism. Is it something that we need to keep portraying in the past, in terms of a reflective past, or in terms of a necessary future? And I think that's where we're going, because whatever we're talking about in the future in Africa must meet two goals: security guarantees and socioeconomic growth. And if we can...
And how different is that with the one of the past?
The one of the past might have meant the same, but the one of the past had an overarching
Are you
necessity
living in the past
to
like
meet
that you're
who
living
is in charge of
Just
that
to qualify
process.
statement.
Yes.
Okay? The one of the past had an overarching need to discuss and address who is in charge of whatever we're talking about. It was about who is wearing the coat, and not just about which coat should be worn. Right now, we are talking about where we need to go now that we are dressed in our coats. And I think that's where I want these conversations to be going. And I think integration is what will take us home. It might be shabby in the moment, but it needs to have quickening feet such that at the absence, and I'm saying this painfully, at the absence of President Museveni, at the absence of President Uhuru Kenyatta, we are losing African statesmen in the sense of Pan-Africanism. Presidents that speak about a unified continent are getting lost.
And not balkanized districts.
Well, that could be it. But part of what brought up Africa in the past was also a paddocking system. That there's a voice in West Africa that would be respected at West African level. There's a voice in North Africa, there's a voice in Southern Africa that would be respected at that level. And I think even that, in that sense, is there. But today on the continent, we have 2-3 voices that speak of Pan-Africanism. And those voices, while they are still living in their late evenings, like President Museveni, must quicken the feet of the young people, such that it is easier for us to be discussing falling apart than uniting, because we have already been balkanized in that sense.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jacob, and of course, to all my panelists today, thank you very much for coming and for respecting our invitation and showing up and also sharing with the people the East African, Ndebesa Mwambustya, Jacob Eyeru.
Thank you.
And particularly my sister had to come from another part of the town to struggle to come and join us. Yes, fantastic, yes.
Obigah Rose, Honorable. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation. And of course, to our viewers who are always with us on this conversation and the chat show every Friday. Thank you very much for being ardent followers. Until we meet next Friday, may God bless Uganda.